We're on the road to Sweet Athy, approaching the South Kildare town from the Kilcullen direction. Our first stop on the outskirts of the town, which was founded as an Anglo-Norman village in the 12th century, is at Gallus Hill. Up to the 18th century, every town had a gallows at its outskirts, at a time when hanging was the penalty for many crimes, even as petty as stealing goods with a value of 5 shillings. Just beyond, on the left-hand side, we have what may be a unique sporting complex for an Irish provincial town. Here the local GA club, the rugby club, the tennis club and the soccer club sit cheek by jowl in the former showgrounds. The GA grounds of Geraldine Park hosted the 1906 All-Ireland football final played on the 31st of October 1907. 2 years later, the 1908 All-Ireland hurling final was played here on the 27th of June 1909. Sporting activities were not in the minds of the Commissioners for Education in Ireland when they financed the building of a model school and agricultural school, which building we pass shortly on the right-hand side. The building was opened in 1850 and was designed by the Yorkshire-born architect Frederick Darley. It was acquired by Kildare County Council some years ago and is now planned to be developed as a food, drinks and skill innovations hub. Frederick Darley, who designed the King's Inn buildings in Dublin, as well as the RDS building in Ballsbridge, was also the architect for the Presbyterian Church just beyond the model school on the left-hand side. This church of finely crafted stonework was built to serve the religious needs of the Presbyterian families from Perthshire in Scotland, who came to South Kildare in the immediate post-famine period, following an invitation from the Duke of Leinster, who offered them farms in this area. As we approach the railway bridge, we pass on the right St. Michael's Cemetery with the ruins of a small medieval church. This may have been the first parish church in the medieval village of Athy, built as it was outside the town wall at a time when the French-speaking Dominicans and the Trinitarians provided church services for the Anglo-Norman settlers only. Buried just inside the front wall of the cemetery is the late Paddy Johnson, who lived in a small terraced house which, with its neighbouring houses, was torn down to accommodate the construction of the railway line to Athy in Carlow in 1846. His neighbours all emigrated to America, where it is said they settled in an area which they called Boherbui, after their old Athy address. Paddy Johnson remained in Athy, and when he died, it is claimed that he was buried in what was once his own backyard. Breasting the railway bridge, we get a panoramic view of Athy east of the River Barrow. This was the scene which greeted the young Ernest Shackleton when he was brought into town, and one which was familiar to Thomas Lefroy, the one-time boyfriend of Jane Austen, who for some years attended a classical school in Athy. The railway station on our left, through which the first train passed on Monday the 3rd of August 1846, was the work of the great Leinster and Munster Railway Company, and in front of the station is the People's Park. This handsome public park was the gift of the town's landlord, the Duke of Leinster, early in the 19th century. Proceeding down Leinster Street, we are reminded that the principal streets of the town are named after the Duke of Leinster's family. The second Duke, William, Duke of Leinster, is recalled in the street named Leinster Street, Duke Street and William Street, which are the main streets of the town of Athy and a fine example of the linear street pattern common to Anglo-Norman settlements. Halfway down Leinster Street, we pass on the left a fine bricked 3-storey building, now a pub, and known previously as the Railway Hotel. A previous owner was Tom Flood, a War of Independence veteran whose brother Frank was hanged in Mountjoy on the 14th of March 1921. Another man with Athy links, Patrick Moran, who prior to the 1916 rising worked for a time in Glyn's pub in Duke Street, Athy, was also hanged in Mountjoy jail on that same day as Frank Flood. Passing by a meeting lane on the left reminds us of the Quaker Meeting House, which opened in 1780 and gave the lane its name, Meeting House Lane. Athy had an active Quaker community several years before the Ballytour village was founded, but regrettably that fine group, which did so much for the Irish people during the Great Famine, no longer have a presence in Athy. A short distance away on our left is the now closed pub, which was owned by the legendary Bapty Marr, who was married to a sister of the Irish patriot, Kevin Barry. We now reach the centre of the town, which with crossroads leading to Monastreven on the right, Carlow on the left, and Kilkenny straight ahead. To our left is Emily Square, named for Emily, wife of the Duke of Leinster and mother of Lord Edward Fitzgerald. Lord Edward was a member of Parliament for Athy Borough Council for some years. The town hall, built in the 1720s to the south side of the town square, houses the Shackleton Museum, and it is where the annual Shackleton Autumn School now takes place. Built 300 years ago as a market house, courthouse and borough offices, the building's courtroom hosted many trials presided over by John Toller, later ennobled as Lord Norbury, but better known in his time as the hanging judge. Wolfe Tone, as a barrister on the Leinster Circuit, appeared on a few occasions at trials in Athy. Between the town hall and the River Barrow, one can see the colonnaded building which was opened in 1852 as a corn exchange and now serves as the town's courthouse. Nearby is the sundial donated by Mochran of Ferm in 1994 to commemorate Athy's part in its founding 50 years previously. At the side of the Shackleton Museum is a much-admired statue of the popular explorer Ernest Shackleton by the English sculptor Mark Richards. In the middle of Emmy Square is a 1798 monument erected some years ago to commemorate the men and women from this area who fought and those who died during the rebellion. Several local men were imprisoned in White's Castle Jail, which is just ahead of us. Patrick O'Kelly, a local man who wrote his account of the 98 rebellion, recounted how 7 young men from South Kildare were marched over Crumaboo Bridge to be hanged on the banks of the Grand Canal. Beheaded, their heads were displayed on Crumaboo Bridge, which was built 2 years previously. Robert Emmet's rebellion 5 years later saw another Athy resident, Nicholas Gray of Rockfield House, arrested and detained in White's Castle Jail. He had been commissioned by Robert Emmet to lead the Kildare men into Dublin. Gray was eventually released, having been transferred to a Dublin prison and allowed to leave Ireland to live out the rest of his life in America. White's Castle, built in 1417 to house a garrison to protect the Bridge of Athy, was adopted for use as a prison following the removal of the soldiers to a newly built barracks in the 1720s. It continued to be used as a jail until about 1830, and for the next 60 years or more served as a police barracks. We now cross Crumaboo Bridge, named for the war cry of the Fitzgeralds. It has been standing since 1796, a much shorter time than the castle rooms we see to our right in the distance. Woodstock Castle, the first stone building in the medieval village of Athy, has remained unoccupied since the middle of the 17th century. Edmund Rice Square is on our right, so named in 1996 to commemorate the Christian brothers whose schools were located off St. John's Lane. St. John's was the original name first used in Anglo-Norman times and is the only street name of that period which is still in use. On our left, through the archway, was the site of the Kellyite meeting house of the early 19th century. Reverend Thomas Kelly, still remembered as one of Ireland's finest hymnologists, was the founder of a breakaway group from the Church of Ireland called the Kellyites. He had 40 or so followers in Athy, as well as meeting houses in Portarlington, Waterford, Wexford and Dublin. The Kellyites as a dissenting group faded away after Kelly died in 1855. Duke Street with Leinster Street is the main shopping street of Athy. In Duke Street we can see several fine examples of jostle stones, a reminder of the horse and carriage days. The jostle stones are at the side of the arch entrances to former stables and were designed to jostle carriage wheels into position as the carriages entered the archways. As we pass up Duke Street, on our left is Convent Lane with the former Dominican church at the end. Now the town library, the building which opened in 1965, represented a remarkable addition to modern Irish church architecture and includes artwork by Breedney Rynn and George Campbell. Further on Duke Street, on our left is Crown House, which once enjoyed the patronage of judges attending the quarter sessions in Athy. Adjoining the Crown House was a town's cockpit, which was a popular venue until cockfighting was made illegal in 1849. The cockpit was restored many years ago. Crown House was from where Stephen Culnan, founder of Mochran of Ferm, first published the Farmer's Journal. Just ahead of us, on the road to Stradbally, which we reach by travelling on Woodstock Street, formerly called Barrack Street, is the site of the former cavalry barracks built in the 1720s. The barracks is now long gone, but as we turn into Woodstock Street, we can see on the left an archway which once formed an entrance to one of the barracks buildings. If we continued towards Stradbally, we would pass on our right St. Vincent's Hospital, first opened in January 1844 as Athy's workhouse. During the Great Famine, the workhouse, built to accommodate 600 persons, catered for over 1,500 men, women and children in any one day, necessitating the opening of 2 auxiliary workhouses in the town. Sadly, 1,250 deaths were recorded in the workhouse during the 4 years of the famine, and those unfortunate people are buried in nearby St. Mary's Cemetery, known locally as the Pauper's Graveyard. Now we continue our journey by William Street to Augustus Bridge, named after one of the Duke of Leinster's sons. We are crossing the Grand Canal, which was extended to Athy in 1791. The Grand Canal, like the railway of 1846, brought prosperity to Athy, allowed it to develop as one of Leinster's great market towns. Facing the Grand Canal is the former Canal Hotel, where travellers stayed overnight so as to catch the Dublin-bound boat which left Athy at 5 o'clock in the morning to reach Athy 13 hours later. We have now reached the end of our tour of Athy, which was once County Killare's principal town. The South Kildare town is traversed by rail, river and canal and is endowed with many buildings of merit. The laneways and byways of Athy, its secret places and hidden corners, all have their own stories to tell, but those stories are possibly for another day.